Those are 5 controversies that I'll talk about. Before I do, there are 3 things you should know. Firstly, EOS is the governance blockchain. So EOS was born out of the idea that there are certain things that humans can do better than code. So Cardano, which EOS is often compared to, is trying to write very perfect code. All right, they use Haskell, which is an easy programming language to verify. They take a very scientific process to development. That's a different philosophy. EOS comes from the philosophy that we need a governance layer so that humans can fix problems with code. There's debate about whether humans should have a lot of control or a little control, but that fundamental idea is the idea of EOS. So if you think that humans should have no control and the code is the law, then EOS may not be your blockchain. However, it's still a great technology, and you could launch another EOS chain that has no governance and just use the technology. But the current version of EOS has this idea that we need at least a little bit of human control to fix the code. Number 2, referendums are coming soon, probably in September. We will see the community vote on questions. This is going to change EOS completely because right now there are just a lot of debates and there's a lot of noise and people get angry. But once we are able to ask token holders to vote on something, that's going to completely change the course of EOS, and I think it'll be for the better. And there will definitely be some people that are not happy with what the community decides, and they will launch their own EOS chain, and that will be a great thing as well. And the cost of launching your own chain is going to go way down too. So I think we're going to see a lot of EOS chains. There are already 2 or 3. All right, so the first controversy is probably the simplest one, the worker proposal system. As Sergey said in his presentation, 4% of the inflation goes into the worker proposal fund. It's an absurd amount of money. It is approximately $20 million per month. By contrast, Dash, which has its own proposal system, their budget is about $1.5 million a month. So the amount of money going into the EOS worker proposal system is insane. And there's discussion of whether it should be smaller than 4%. The number 1% has been floated around, or if it should be gone completely. And Dan Larimer, the inventor of EOS, who tends to be very fast and loose on all his projects, his philosophy seems to be develop quickly, see what happens, and then adjust. He has tweeted that we should eliminate the worker proposal system completely. It's going to be very interesting when the referendums start happening because this decision is going to come up for a vote. We'll see what the token holders decide. Controversy number 2 is the legitimacy of the Constitution. The Constitution was sort of decided upon by a bunch of block producers on a video chat saying who supports the current Constitution, and they type in yes or no, and somebody counts the number of yeses and the number of nos, and it was, okay, good enough, this is going to be the Constitution. It was just done sort of by consensus with the idea that the Constitution would also come up for a vote. So some people say that that's legitimate, that it's good enough. Dan Larimer says it's good enough. I think it's good enough. I think the current version of the Constitution is in effect. There is a minority that says that until we have a vote of token holders, it's not in effect. There are clear violations of the current Constitution happening now. For example, there's a block producer. Okay, so the Constitution says that BPs have to abide by the Reg Producer Agreement. The Reg Producer Agreement says that BPs need to announce who owns them. They need to be transparent about their holdings. Bitfinex, there's one of the very top block producers, wrote a very thoughtful article saying, we can't do this because we need to protect our investors. So we have good intentions, but we can't do this. No vote buying, that's in the Constitution. There were block producers that advertised on their website that vote for us and we'll give you money. It was on their website. So there are clearly violations of the current constitution. And I think the problem is that naive American idealism. Can somebody translate that into Russian? How do you say naive American idealism? Okay. So the Constitution is just a bunch of principles. No lying. Okay, great. Let's have a party. No lying. But at some point, you need to translate principles into action. Like, what do you do when somebody lies? What do you do when Bitfinex says, you know, we have only good intentions, we're a responsible block producer, but we can't make our disclosures because we need to protect investors? So the Constitution is all idealism. I think it should be more like Hammurabi's Code, which was just codifying punishments, saying what actions you should take for what crimes. We'll see what happens. Okay, so in summary, most people think that the current Constitution is valid. A small minority says it's not. Next controversy, the scope of the Constitution. So it has a bunch of stuff in there like no lying, that they use fancier legal language, no vote buying, has things like that. Dan Larimer, the creator of EOS, once again demonstrates his willingness to make quick changes. He wrote an article saying, reducing the scope of the Constitution. He says, I don't like what's happening. The only thing the Constitution should do is interpret the intent of the code. So they should just look at what the code did and look at what the code was supposed to do. So that reduces this big scope of governance down to just, you know, we'll fix malicious code, you know, hackers who write code that looks like it does one thing but does another, and bugs. That, as you might expect, drove some people crazy because people spent months figuring out the Constitution, and Dan Larimer wrote a pretty aggressive article saying we should just reduce it down to interpreting the code. So this is going to be extremely interesting when the referendums start happening next month. Maybe we'll end up with 2 chains, maybe we'll end up with 1. We'll see what happens. Next controversy, ECAF. ECAF stands for EOS Core Arbitration Forum. It is the judicial system. It's like the courts, okay? So the Constitution says that ECAF is the legitimate arbitration forum, but who's ECAF? It's a bunch of people that got together and they were the first ones to start calling themselves ECAF, and they took active part in the community so everybody knew who they were. But it's not clear if they're legitimate, because again, no referendum. It's not clear how other people can join ECAF. It's not clear whether, you know, ECAF 2 can emerge and compete, and all of these things are going to get figured out soon. One thing that I love about EOS is that you can choose your own arbitration forum. So if I write a DApp, I can, you know, anybody who interacts with the DApp, I can have them sign an agreement that if you participate with my application, any disputes have to be resolved in Roman's arbitration forum. Okay, but that's voluntary agreement if somebody comes to my application and chooses to use it. The whole controversy revolves when there's no agreement. So like, what's the base layer? What do you do if a block producer violates the rules? That's where all the controversy is. Does ECAF have authority? Because there was no like agreement. Okay, just 2 more. I'm going quickly so that we have more time for questions. Should block producers kick out bad block producers? Dan Larimer has said multiple times that if a block producer is not producing and not responding when people try to contact him, other block producers should just deregister him. That's been discussed. The block producers do not want to do that because there's a perception that we're too much of a centralized power. I don't think we are. Like, whenever a block producer does something even a little bit wrong, the community just jumps all over them. So I think the block producers are the most accountable people in EOS. But nevertheless, we don't want to deregister bad block producers unless there's a referendum and the token holders vote that we can do that. Last controversy is a small one. There's an organization that just formed called the EOS Alliance, and they model themselves on the Bitcoin Foundation or the Ethereum Foundation. They say we are self-funded and we have no formal power. We're just a communications organization. And I think everyone supports that, but there are some fears that people in the EOS Alliance are trying to do a power grab. I don't think there's that much evidence for it, but the fear is certainly there. There's also a fear that philosophically, the people in the EOS Alliance want very big governance when we should have a very small governance. So to recap, these are what I think are the 5 or 6 biggest controversies: worker proposal system, the legitimacy of the Constitution, the scope of the Constitution, ECAF, whether block producers should kick out other block producers, and the EOS Alliance, which is a voluntary organization. Other voluntary organizations are also forming. Sergey and we talked about making a Eastern Europe EOS Alliance, which would be really cool. There's also an organization forming, right now it's just a Telegram channel, but it's called FreeOS. And these are people who believe very strongly in very small governance. And man, it's going to be an interesting few months when the referendums start happening. I think we'll leave it open to questions on any subject. So if there are any, I saw a hand up here, and maybe you'll be next. Should I pass the microphone when there's a question, or how are we doing this? Here.
Just tell me, as for newbie, what are responsibilities and liabilities for block producers? What they have to do, and how community will assess them, to choose them, to vote for them, and other things?
Well, this is a big question, and this is something that block producers spend a lot of time thinking about. What does the community want? I'm not sure. But obviously, you need to produce blocks. Obviously, you need to be online when ECAF says you need to block transactions from these accounts. You need to show up. It's good if you're compliant. There are certain rules that block producers need to have certain endpoints and a website and stuff like that. So those are all the obvious things. Beyond that, some block producers are trying to build projects. Some block producers are translating into other languages. Some block producers are really good at communication, and there's different types of communication. Some block producers are creating like tutorials for end users. Some are communicating with exchanges and just being sort of the bridge. What do exchanges need? They even gave a little patch that should reduce. It's a little patch that solves a common problem which exchanges will probably encounter with bad memos. Wrote a little patch. It was probably, I don't know, 20 minutes of work, but it was important because it saves exchanges a lot of trouble. So yeah, does that answer your question? There's the formal requirements, which is producing blocks and doing all the associated communication, and then everybody else is trying to demonstrate that they're creating some kind of value.
So you just told about bad block producers as one of the controversies you told us, right? And so the bad block producers are guys who is not online, right? And it's a subjective thing, view of community, yeah?
Yeah, it's subjective. It's definitely subjective, like who's good, who's bad. I should have used the word non-compliant. I can give you one concrete example. They blacklisted some accounts because there was strong evidence of hacking. Okay, blacklisted doesn't mean we're taking over the accounts. It means it's a temporary freeze. For now, the way blacklists are implemented is all the top 21 block producers just stop processing transactions from certain accounts. So, account can't get their transaction sent because nobody's just putting them onto the chain. So 20 of the top 21 block producers blacklisted those accounts, but one block producer, they were nowhere to be found. They weren't answering, and their node, made all the transactions from the blacklisted account. They were EOS Store. Much to their credit, they said that they would take from their block rewards to compensate the suspected victims. So that's a concrete example of sort of a failure of a block producer, but nobody knows what the standards are. Nobody knows how much is too much, and we're all figuring it out. Yes. You're next.
One. Yeah, okay. Thank you for your speech. I have a question on scope of constitution. So could you elaborate, please, the question? What is the malicious behavior in scope of community, and does it mean censoring of transactions in some way? Who decides what is malicious, what is not?
Okay, well, I could tell you according to the launch constitution, the constitution that most people think is currently in effect, if Dan Larimer gets his Constitution 2.0, then, then the only thing that malicious behavior is. All right, let me take a step back. So EOS has the concept of a Ricardian contract. So when you create an application on EOS, you should create this human-readable explanation of what the code does. So if Dan Larimer gets his Constitution 2.0, the only job of ECAF will be to look what happened, read the Ricardian contract, and say, this is what was supposed to happen, and then make a ruling based on that. So according to the proposed Constitution 2.0, the only malicious behavior is having code that doesn't do what you said it will do. And writing those Ricardian contracts is going to become a profession if you're looking for a job, because it's not going to be easy. Okay, but malicious behavior under the existing constitution includes a lot of things, like lying. Okay, for example, there was an account that took my photograph and Bogdan's photograph and said, we're CryptoLions 2, send money to CryptoLions 2. It seemed like a Ponzi scheme. So I think that's malicious behavior, that's lying. That's against Article 2 of the Constitution.
Yeah, okay, and if, let's say, it will be the honest Ponzi scheme without all that scam with your photos.
I think that would be okay, as long as they're not lying. Yeah, as long as the code matches the Ricardian contract, I think that would be okay. You mentioned another thing when you were saying malicious code. You mentioned, like not processing transactions. That's in the launch constitution. You cannot show favoritism to any transactions. So as a block producer, you have to be fair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your speech. I have a question regarding Security Exchange Commission, and this question might be driven by my overthinking of the issue. So basically, in the financial industry, if you want to make money on money, if you want to earn interest, you have to get a license, right? In general. So right now, as of now, Constitution forbids to reward voters, which means that if they stake their money, it is forbidden to pay them interest or something. So if the community follows the approach and adopts the approach of Larimer and adopts Constitution 2.0, where, as I understood from your speech, this cause will be eliminated, then how do you think, what Security Exchange Commission might think about this whole ecosystem? Because my understanding is that it may say, okay, guys, this is like big landing scheme. What is your opinion? Thank you.
That's a very good question, and what I'm saying is only my opinion, because this is far from my expertise. I don't know. Those problems are going to happen anyway, because there are several projects where you could rent your tokens and collect interest on them. Just renting RAM, for example, renting CPU. I'm going to talk around your question because I don't know the answer, but hopefully what I say is interesting, and then I'll hand the mic to Sergey. Maybe he knows. Okay. So Block One, that's the company in the U.S. that made it. It's Dan Larimer's company. They did a really kind of funny thing. They said, we're just building free software. We're not launching the chain. So they try very hard to distance themselves from the actual chain. They made the default setting where 10% of the tokens go to them, but like they didn't force the block producers to launch the chain that way. So it's very important to Block One that says we're just a software company. We can build anybody can launch using our software. If the community decides to give us 10%, that's great, but we're not forcing them to do it. And those are some of the crazy hoops that they're jumping through to satisfy the SEC.
Is questions and maybe task for your speech also. Can you please explain for me and community, the local community, what is going on with blocking on the early stages of those 27 transactions? Because everybody is asking me and complaining that EOS is highly centralized. And do you remember about this block? Can you tell community more in details what has happened and why?
Yeah, okay. Well, blocking an account means that the block producers all just stop processing transactions from certain accounts. So if you're the owner of that account, you can't do anything with your EOS because your transactions will not get added to the blockchain. It's always temporary, and the decision is made by ECAF, the small group of people that started calling themselves ECAF and are probably most recognized as being ECAF. So they say there's enough evidence of malicious behavior from these accounts. So they ask the block producers, stop processing transactions from these accounts. That's what it means to blacklist an account. You just stop adding transactions. And then they just stop. The next step is an investigation. And then after the investigation, they make a decision to unfreeze the account or to take 10 tokens or however much they supposedly stole. That's the process. I guess when I encounter the same stuff that you do, I just say, this is what a governed blockchain is. You don't get governance without this. You could either fork EOS if you like the technology and have no governance layer, or you could go to Cardano and try to write perfect or near perfect code. Other questions?
My question is, the first one is, what is your way to EOS? So why EOS? So that's the first question, your personal way. And the second question, why 21 block producer? Are there any scientific background for this? Why not 12 or 33 or 100? Thank you.
Well, I came to crypto pretty early. I came to crypto when I was writing articles for a libertarian magazine. After my first article, they said, what do you want, $20 or some Bitcoin? And that was the first time I heard of Bitcoin. I said, it looks really cool, but I don't have time to figure this out right now. Please give me $20. Then I wrote another article for them, and they said, look, we stopped doing dollars because we don't believe in fiat. You have to accept Bitcoin. I was like, oh, crap, I have to learn this new stuff.
What was the year when you were writing the first articles?
I was like, I installed the software reluctantly, and instead of sending me $20, they sent me like 7 Bitcoin. It was 2012, right when the price crashed from 40 down to 2 or 3. So it turned out okay. Although I sold them before it was enough money to, it wasn't life-changing money, but it was good. Yeah, so I got into crypto early. Bogdan and we built a Bitcoin block explorer. We built a little gaming site. And then I just liked EOS. The technology sounded great. Dan Larimer had a proven track record, and it just seemed like the right thing at the right time. And I guess we'll all find out in the next year whether I was right or not. So far it's been great. And the other question, why 21? This has a very concise answer. It's a compromise between being decentralized, not having too few, and overcoming people's ability to, to research block producers and make good decisions. If it was like 100, it would be hard for people to devote enough time to pick the good block producers. That was the thinking. And I think with those two considerations, 21 just sounded right.
Thank you. I have a question. Is it true that 25% of EOS smart contracts have bugs, and what to do with that?
I don't know. Has anybody else heard that?
Newsbitcoin.com just today published an article on this, and that's why I want to clarify whether it's true or not.
It's the first I've heard of it. But EOS, like the point of EOS is that we have a human layer to take care of bugs, so it's the right place to have bugs. There's debate on whether it should be a big human layer or a small one, but that's why we do governance.
I think it's only 25% is good. Because the majority of software has the bugs. Big or small bugs.
Well,
Yeah.
Ethereum, how many? No.
I think unlimited.
Okay,
So
thank
you're
you.
saying that 75%.
Yeah.
But it says about like it talks about it tells us about 25% all smart contracts.
Oh, it's all smart contracts on Bitcoin.com.
It's not specific. Wait. It's not specific about EOS smart contracts.
They could just
I will
change the
check.
title. They
Sorry.
could change the title and say that 75% of smart contracts are
Because-
perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Huge thanks to Blockchain Hub for this wonderful space. Oh, and Roman has a question.
Yeah, maybe a small one. What is the tool base for the referendum that is going to happen next month? I mean, like, is there any like official tool that is advertised by everyone?
They are building both a front end and the smart
You
contract
mean-
for it. There's a group of block producers and community members. I forgot the name of the Telegram channel where you can go to follow the action. But let's
Yeah, but how the community finds out about the tool? I mean, like,
Well, that's a persistent problem in EOS, but I think they ask, well, like the EOS Alliance, they're really good at communication. For example, they asked a lot of the block producers just to tweet about them, which took a lot of work on their part, but it seemed effective. Maybe they'll do the same thing, or maybe it will be a problem. Maybe not enough people will know about it.
but among the block producers, there is a consensus which tools you would advertise to use in the community.
I would say among the, not just the block producers, like everybody wants this referendum contract, because like everyone is just so tired of trying to come to a decision without a precise way of measuring. So just being able to ask the community a question, that's a white paper feature. Some people are angry that it wasn't in the release, it wasn't in the original launch, because it's been kind of we've needed it. You know, we would have avoided a lot of controversy if it was here from the beginning.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone. If you have more questions, come on up here and ask me or Sergey or Bogdan or Roman.